The Georgia heat didn't just sit on you, it owned you. It was a heavy, wet blanket that smelled of turned earth and old sweat, clinging to the skin long after the sun had bled into the horizon. For Elijah, that heat was a prison without bars, a constant reminder of a life measured in pounds of cotton and the crack of a leather whip. But tonight, the air felt different. Tonight, the wind carried a secret. Elijah stood by the door of his small, splintered cabin, listening to the rhythm of the plantation settling into an uneasy sleep. Somewhere in the distance, a hound bayed at the moon, a lonely, mournful sound that usually chilled his bones. But tonight, Elijah didn't feel the chill. He felt the burn of a decision that had been simmering in his blood since the day he was born. Earlier that evening, while the overseer was distracted by a broken wagon wheel, Elijah heard the master talking on the porch. The words were clipped, casual, like he was discussing the price of corn. Sell him south, New Orleans, by Tuesday. New Orleans, the bottom of the barrel, a place where men went to die in the cane fields, swallowed by the swamp. Elijah looked down at his hands. They were scarred, calloused, shaped by years of labor that belonged to someone else. He looked at his wife, Sarah, sleeping on the pallet of straw in the corner. Her breathing was soft, a fragile rhythm in the dark. He couldn't wake her. He couldn't tell her. To know was to be complicit, and to be complicit was a death sentence. He had to go alone, to forge a path and pray to the Almighty that he could one day send for her. He kneeled beside her, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He didn't kiss her. That would break him. Instead, he gently touched the hem of her rough dress, a silent vow pressed into the fabric. "I will come back," he screamed in the silence of his mind. "I will walk through hell and high water, but I will come back." Rising to his feet, Elijah grabbed the small bundle he had hidden beneath the floorboards weeks ago. A piece of stale cornbread, a small knife made from a sharpened spoon, and a pouch of pepper and pine needles to throw off the scent for the dogs. He stepped out into the night. The moon was a sliver of bone in a bruised sky, offering just enough light to see the tree line. That tree line was the edge of his world. Beyond it lay the unknown. Beyond it lay the Underground Railroad, not a train of iron and steam, but a whispered promise, a network of ghosts and saints who moved in the shadows. He took his first step off the packed dirt of the slave quarters. The ground felt different now. It wasn't the master's earth anymore. It was the battlefield. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot. Every rustle of leaves sounded like the overseer's boots. Elijah forced himself to breathe. "Look up," the elders had whispered. "Find the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd." He cast his eyes upward, searching the velvet blackness until he found it. The Big Dipper, pointing faithfully to the North Star. A tiny, unmoving diamond that promised that somewhere, far beyond the rivers and the mountains, a man could own his own breath. Elijah tightened his grip on his bundle. He didn't run. Running attracted attention. He walked with a ghost tread, sliding into the embrace of the deep woods. The shadows swallowed him whole. Behind him lay the only life he had ever known, a life of chains. Ahead of him lay 1,000 miles of terror. But as his foot touched the soft moss of the forest floor, Elijah realized something that made tears sting his eyes. For the first time in 20 years, he was not walking toward the fields. He was walking toward himself.
The silence of the woods was a liar. It promised peace, yet it only amplified the frantic drumming of Elijah's own heart. He walked not just on his legs, but on the memory of Sarah's face, tracing the path by the celestial compass of the North Star. The hours bled into one another, a slow, agonizing river of cold mud and biting despair. He was no longer a man. He was a whisper in the dark, a shadow chasing a distant hope. He covered perhaps 10 miles before the blackness began to yield. The dense, choking pines gave way to fields, and the scent of wild garlic was replaced by the faint, comforting aroma of wood smoke and turned soil, signs of human habitation. Safety or trap? In this cursed latitude, the two were often the same. The instructions, whispered years ago by a tired traveling preacher, echoed in his mind. Follow the creek until you see the sycamore split like a serpent's tongue. There you look for the window. Elijah's feet, raw and aching, carried him past the split sycamore. He paused, his body melting against the trunk, observing. Across the barren field stood a modest farmhouse, dark and silent, swallowed by the immense night. But in the small upper window, the window facing north, a tiny light flickered, the color of weak tea. It wasn't a practical light for reading or seeing. It was a signal. This was it, the first station. A fresh wave of terror washed over him. Running from the master was a terror of the known. Approaching this door was the terror of the unknown. The master's cruelty was predictable. This house's kindness could be a deadly lie, a trap set by slave catchers hoping to collect the bounty. He took 3 deep breaths, tasting the stale fear in his throat. He remembered the chains, the auction block, the finality of the New Orleans sale. That was the end. This, however perilous, was a chance. He crept across the frozen field, the dry stubble crunching under his feet with a sound that seemed to shatter the night's stillness. At the back porch, he found the prearranged code, 3 small river stones placed on the lowest wooden step, a confirmation. He raised his raw knuckles and knocked. 1 slow, deliberate rap, then 2 quick taps, then silence. The silence that followed was immense, heavy enough to crush him. It stretched for what felt like an hour, filled only by the wind whistling a lonely tune beneath the porch. He was ready to flee, to disappear back into the safety of the dark woods. Then, the sound of a bolt being slowly drawn back. The door opened just a crack, revealing a sliver of the warm kitchen light within. Framed in the opening was an older woman, pale as linen, with kind but weary eyes shielded by spectacles. She held a heavy brass lamp high, and its yellow glow fell only upon Elijah's face, his wide, exhausted eyes, his chapped lips, and his terror. She did not flinch, she did not scream. She looked past his ragged clothes, past the dirt, and saw only the hunted soul. Her voice, soft and steady as a church hymn, cut through the tension with a question that was also a code. "Are you here for the evening milk, son?" Elijah's voice was a dry, unused rasp, but the answer came, the final key to unlock this door, a desperate oath of faith. "Ma'am," he whispered, the sound catching in his throat, "I seek the cow that gives the sweet water of freedom." She opened the door wider, her gaze never leaving his. The smell of baking bread and safety washed over him, a dizzying perfume. "Then hasten inside, child, for the night is long, and the way is yet longer."
Ilara, the woman of the house, did not waste time on pity or small talk. Survival was a swift business. She ushered Elijah into a hidden pantry, its air thick with the smell of dried herbs and winter apples. Sliding a heavy shelf aside, she revealed a cramped, dark opening leading down to a small, damp root cellar. "Down you go, child," she commanded softly, her voice still steady, but her eyes holding a newly minted anxiety. "You breathe only when the mice breathe, and you make not a sound that could wake the dust." Elijah descended, the cold earth swallowing the heat of his body. The cellar was cramped, smelling of potatoes and deep, ancient soil. It was the safest place he had been in all his life, yet the fear here was sharper, more acute. If the patrollers came, he would be a trapped animal. Ilara knelt by the opening, placing a small bowl of fresh milk and a thick slice of rye bread within his reach. "My name is Ilara. We are Quakers here. We believe that no man should own the soul of another. You are welcome, and you are hidden." "Ma'am," Elijah managed, the simple kindness of the food almost breaking his resolve. "My wife, Sarah, I left her behind." Ilara's eyes softened, a deep, sorrowful reflection of countless partings she had witnessed. "Then that is your North Star now, Elijah. The yearning must be stronger than the fear. Rest, you have a long road ahead." He ate quickly, the food a necessary fuel, not a pleasure. The silence of the cellar was oppressive, broken only by the drip of moisture down the stone wall. He thought of Sarah, imagining the terror she felt waking to an empty cabin. He focused all his desperate longing, all his fear for her safety, into a single, silent prayer. It was just past the middle of the night when the world outside exploded. He heard the sound first, the hard, rapid drumming of horse hooves on the frozen ground outside the farmhouse. Then came the shouting, gruff, authoritative voices laced with frustration and liquor. The distinct, terrifying jingle of a patroller's chain harness. Elijah froze, pressing himself against the cold, earthy wall. His breath stopped. He could hear his own heartbeat, a frantic drumbeat that felt certain to betray him. He strained his ears. Were they stopping? Were they at the door? A sudden sharp thud sounded directly above him, followed by the muffled, deep voice of a man. They were in the kitchen. "Ilara, old woman, we've tracked a runaway across the creek. Did you hear anything pass?" Ilara's voice, astonishingly calm, drifted down. "In this cold? Only the wind, Captain. I've been abed since dusk. You know I hold no love for the fuss and the chase." There was a heavy silence. He could feel the immense, fragile weight of the lie hanging in the air just inches above his head. He could hear the creak of the floorboards. The patroller was moving. Was he inspecting the pantry? Was the shelf secure? Then the terrible, close sound of a boot scraping the wooden floor right above the cellar entrance. Elijah shut his eyes, tasting the iron tang of fear on his tongue. He knew he was about to die. A moment later, the man scoffed. "Waste of time. We'll check the barn. Mind your business, Ilara." The voices faded, replaced by the receding thunder of hooves. Elijah didn't move for another 10 minutes. When he finally allowed himself to breathe, his lungs screamed. Ilara lifted the shelf, her face pale but resolute. "They are gone for now," she whispered, "but the daylight is coming, and you must not be here. The next station is 6 hours north by the river ferry. God's grace is with the swift." She handed him a dark shawl and a small cryptic map drawn on linen. The fragile safety of the station was broken. Elijah was back on the run, but now he carried not only fear, but a flicker of human trust that warmed him more than any fire.
Ilara, the woman of the house, did not waste time on pity or small talk. Survival was a swift business. She ushered Elijah into a hidden pantry, its air thick with the smell of dried herbs and winter apples. Sliding a heavy shelf aside, she revealed a cramped, dark opening leading down to a small, damp root cellar. "Down you go, child," she commanded softly, her voice still steady, but her eyes holding a newly minted anxiety. "You breathe only when the mice breathe, and you make not a sound that could wake the dust." Elijah descended, the cold earth swallowing the heat of his body. The cellar was cramped, smelling of potatoes and deep, ancient soil. It was the safest place he had been in all his life, yet the fear here was sharper, more acute. If the patrollers came, he would be a trapped animal. Elijah moved with the desperate, staggering gait of a man who had not slept, whose heart had not rested for 3 sunrises. The map Elara had given him was a promise, a single, fragile piece of linen guiding him toward the great river, the final boundary of his legal enslavement. Every shadow was a patroller, every distant sound a barking hound. His exhaustion was absolute, yet the thought of Sarah, the desire to make his freedom a key for her lock, kept the engine of his will burning. He reached the riverbank just as the deepest black of night began to yield to a thin gray veil of dawn. The water was wide, cold, and forbidding, a vast, rushing black highway separating 2 worlds. He saw the signal, a small, dark boat tethered beneath a drooping willow, its solitary occupant wrapped in thick wool, waiting. The ferryman, an old, free black man named Silas, did not look up when Elijah approached. He simply extended a massive, weathered hand, and Elijah gripped it, pulling himself into the small craft. No words were exchanged. Words were dangerous, unnecessary. The language they shared was the language of fear, hope, and the North Star. Silas pushed off, and the river immediately tried to claim them, pulling the boat downstream. The crossing was agonizingly slow. Elijah sat huddled, his eyes fixed on the far shore, which was still just a smudge of dark trees against the paling sky. He thought of the thousands of lives swallowed by these waters, lost between the promise and the peril. He was leaving his past behind, yes, but he was leaving his life, his love, his anchor behind as well. The boat scraped against the far bank. They had crossed. Silas cut the silence with a voice like river gravel. "Welcome to Canada, son, or as close to God's country as you'll get without flying. The law stops at that river's edge. You are safe." Elijah climbed out onto the muddy, foreign soil. He stood upright, his back protesting, his legs shaking. He waited for the feeling. He waited for the choirs to sing, for the sudden rush of joy, for the burdens to lift. But the silence only deepened. There was no grand explosion of feeling, only a profound, dizzying emptiness. The chains weren't gone, they were simply invisible now. The freedom he had fought for was not a destination, it was merely the new starting line. He turned back toward the south, the direction of the master, the cotton fields, and the woman who slept alone. The North Star was fading into the dawn, but its light had done its work. Elijah fell to his knees, burying his raw hands in the free earth. "I am no man's property," he whispered, the sound a ragged promise carved into the cold morning air. "I carry my own name now. I am Elijah, and I swear by the light of that fading star, I will not rest until the sweet water of freedom reaches your lips too, Sarah." He rose, a free man burdened by an impossible vow, and began to walk north toward a new life, turning his hope for reunion into the soul-enduring purpose of his freedom. The journey was over, and the mission had just begun.